time for Q&A. We recognize that some of you are on the phone, so we will ask you if you can unmute if you do have a question. So you will be able to get your questions answered. Another great feature about Microsoft Teams, if you are in the platform, is that you can turn on your closed captions. If you are looking for that, it's on the three little dots. When you look at the top of your toolbar on the laptop or on the bottom on your phone, you click the three little dots and go down to turn on live captions, which can help with your understanding of the training and everything that's being shared. We also have reactions. So I'm going to model the icon with the person and the hand raised. I can laugh at something. You should see on my screen, I can send a heart. And these are fun ways that if you really like something that's shared, you can send a quick reaction. You can also raise your hand, and your hand will stay up until you put it down. So we love to utilize those features as well. So without any further ado, I am now going to pass it over to our presenter for today, Mariela Paulino of Project Hearing. Very excited to have her share her knowledge with us and her lived experience and her stories. So Mariela, over to you.
Thank you, Katarina. So hi, everybody. Super excited to be with all of you today. So let me just go ahead and share my screen with all of you. Oops. Are you all able to see my screen now? Yes, fantastic. So let's go ahead and get this party started. So for today, we are going to be talking about communicating with mass clients with me as your host. My name is Mariela Paulino, and I am the creator of a project that I started called Project Hearing. So a little bit about me, I'll just start with an audio description. So I am a Hispanic woman. I have tan skin, I have bangs, and I have long, medium brown hair. I am wearing a black shirt. Behind me, there is a painting and a cream color background. In the picture that you see on my screen, I am smiling and wearing a blue dress with flowers. Katarina, I think somebody needs to be muted. Anyway, I will go ahead and go over the agenda. So we already went about me, then we're going to do a quick simulation. So I will show all of you a video, just really showcasing a little bit about how I hear, to give you all just the opportunity to maybe experience what it's like to have a hearing disability. And we're going to do a pop quiz. Pop quiz, I love pop quizzes. I was that student in school. Then we're going to talk about what is disability. Then we're going to talk about the social and medical model of disability. Close up with a conversation on what is accessibility. And then we're finally going to go into a very extensive conversation on how to facilitate mass conversation and communication, whether you have a disability or not, in our it's not really post-COVID, but in our current COVID world. So just a really quick story about why I started Project Hearing. I started Project Hearing because back in around 2014, I was living in Virginia. And this was my first time living independently. I was, cruising, hair down, feeling the sound. And I was speeding. I was late for something as usual. And Virginia is really the worst place that you can be speeding because you will get caught. I mean, if you go even 1 mile over the speed limit, you will get pulled over. This was also my first time getting pulled over. So I am driving and I hear the wheel. And I just put my hands at 3 and 9, just like I had practiced with my family, and I waited. The officer started talking over the loudspeaker, but to me, that sounded like blah, 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 blah. I have a hearing disability. I use something called cochlear implants, and so sound is not always clear. So in that situation, I was not able to understand what the police officer was saying to me. I just put my hands at 3 and 9 and I wait. I look at my rear view mirror and I see the officer coming out of his car with the hand on the holster. And as he's walking towards my door, I just turn down my window and I turn around and I say, "Officer, I have a hearing disability. I didn't understand what you were saying." And so when I say that, the whole situation diffuses. At the end of it, the officer lets me go off with a smile, and I'm like, I just smile and I'm like, "I'm really sorry. I wasn't intending to speed." And he lets me go off with a warning. But before doing that, I asked him, "I'm sorry, officer, do you have any suggestions that you recommend for ensuring my safety? This could have been a very dangerous situation. And do you offer any alternatives, any solutions?" And he said, "That's not my problem. Figure it out." Not the solution you want to hear from a police officer, but I did figure it out, and I decided to pursue my master's in communications from Georgetown University, exploring explicitly how people with hearing disabilities move around and communicate with the world around them. What I found from that research was that a police officer will scan the back of your vehicle for about 6 seconds. In those 6 seconds, you have to communicate to a police officer who you are. Are you a doctor? Maybe is that why you're speeding? Are you a National Rifle Association member? Do you maybe have a weapon in your car? Like, you want to be able to communicate who you are. And it came up with this idea of a sticker that I put in the back of my car that says that driver changed everything for me. And I want to think that it prevented things from escalating a few times. So when you are a person with a disability, miscommunication can be incredibly dangerous, not just with police officers, but when you're at the doctor's, going to a restaurant, hanging out with friends. There have been instances where someone will be talking to me and I'm not able to hear what they're saying. And then they'll think, "You know what? When I met you, I thought you were so stuck up." And I'm just like, "Why? Why would you say that?" And people will say things like, "Oh, I was always saying good morning to you when I saw you and you just kept walking." And I'm just like, "I just didn't hear you." And when I say that to people, it's like a light bulb moment. Oh my God, here I was making all these assumptions about her. And so miscommunication is dangerous, and always lead with empathy. So let's go into the simulation of what hearing loss is. And I found this amazing video that I'm going to share with all of you. So Katerina, I just want to confirm with you that the sound, that everyone is able to hear the sound. If you are not able to hear the sound, just let me know. All right, so this is the video. Oops. Oh, what? Okay, there we go. I know I'm young, could be a little bit wiser, but I've had my share of love, and I've seen enough of pain and fire and ice to know the cold will suffice. Estimate if you can tolerate my opinion. For once in your life. So I am just going to ask people, was that cool or what? It is basically a video that showcases different ways that different people with hearing disabilities hear and what they are hearing. So if you're someone that has even mild to moderate hearing disability, you will hear differently than someone with a hearing disability. And so one of the things I'm going to touch on in just 1 minute is just how much the mask distorts sound. So let's go into the pop quiz. I love pop quizzes. So I'm going to ask people in the chat, true or false. This is not going to be rocket science test. It's a true or false test. People with disabilities do not disclose their disability due to fear of discrimination. So I'm going to ask participants to just submit in the chat whether they think this is true or false? We've got true. We've got one true, true, true. Yes. So the answer to our pop quiz is going to be true. Study after study after study after study has shown that people with hearing disabilities or with disabilities in general fear disclosing their disability due to fear of discrimination, even if they will benefit from accommodations following disclosure. The reason for that is that having a disability means that you make yourself vulnerable to discrimination, bias, and prejudices of people who may not necessarily understand the accommodations you need. It is why trainings like this are so important, because they allow us to look at the perspective from someone else and maybe fill in those gaps that we may not be aware of. The reality is that currently in the United States, 1 in 4 adults has some form of disability, has a disability. It could be a visible disability, such as a wheelchair, but it can also be, like the majority of disabilities are invisible. So for example, I have my hearing equipment, but if I put my hair down and I cover my ears, and because I am talking to you the way I am, and I am not using American Sign Language, my disability becomes invisible. The majority of disabilities are invisible, are not visible. You will not be able to look at a person and say, you have a disability. That is not typically the case. But what is a disability really? Like when we talk about disabilities, what are we talking about? Because disability is a spectrum. It is a spectrum. Yes, and Katerina just made a comment and she said, and this number is increasing now due to COVID-19. That is so incredibly accurate. So many more people are becoming temporarily or permanently disabled as a result of contracting COVID-19, sometimes having permanent lifelong disabilities that are not always visible. So when we talk about disability being a spectrum, what do we
Mariela,
go for it?
so sorry to interrupt your flow. Would it be possible to present or to make the picture bigger?
Absolutely. Let me see. Is this better?
Okay. If you click present, I think it will fill the whole screen.
Okay, let's see.
In the top right.
Does this work?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So, ready to go back?
Yes.
Are we good to go, Katerina?
Yes, everything looks great. Thank you.
All right, not a problem. So when we talk about disabilities as being a spectrum, there are permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities. So let's talk about deafness, for example. There are some people that are born deaf, and so they do not hear at all. Their anatomy maybe is not working in conjunction with the way that it is supposed to, and they have a permanent disability. There are some people that maybe have an ear infection. And so having an ear infection means that your ear, the anatomy is maybe not working as well as it should, and you get your ear drops within a week, you're absolutely fine. But having an ear infection is a disability. And then there's also situational disabilities. So now that everybody's getting vaccinated, everybody's going to be going out to the club. And sometimes you're out at like a bar and somebody's like shaking a martini. It's so loud, and there's music playing, and you're just talking with your friends and you're like, what? Speak louder. That is a situational disability. So it's very important for us to remember the context of disability and how disability can and is a spectrum. But now let's explore the social and medical models of disability, because there are two different ways that we can talk about disability. So this is one of the quotes that I absolutely love and live by. It is by a disability advocate by the name of Lydia X.C. Brown. I saw them back in 2013 2014, and this is my north. And the quote says, I am disabled by design, by other people's lower expectations of me. Being disabled is not about having something wrong with me. I am disabled by the constraints of the design of the world in which I exist. Wow, I love that. Every time I read this quote, it just gives me shudders because it's not about there being something with my body. It's about the world now being accessible and accommodating to my body. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is about improving the environment and making it more accessible instead of trying to fix the individual. What that means is that I have a hearing disability. I have the tremendous privilege of being able to have hearing equipment, which allows me to hear. However, if I was having a conversation with someone via video, we cannot expect for everybody to get a cochlear implant to hear or to be able to afford hearing aids. And so it is crucial for us to improve environments, digital and physical spaces, to make sure that they are accessible for everybody. So the body is not the thing that needs fixing. It is the policies, it is the changes in behavior, and it is our commitment as a society to make sure that every single body can have the same experience. So when we talk about disability,
All right.
I think somebody talks. I think, are we good? Okay. So one of the things that really has allowed for us to have conversations about disability is something known as the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was signed by the first President Bush, and it is his keynote legislation. So one of the really interesting things about the ADA, it is the first federal piece of legislation that gave rights to people with disabilities and prevented discrimination at the federal level. The ADA is going to be turning 31 years old this July, and it blows my mind every time I say that, because the ADA is the first federal piece of legislation that said to people like me that we need to have equal rights under the law. Before the ADA, people like me were thrown into institutions, hidden away from society, prevented from having access to jobs and an education and just being regular, normal, productive members of society. The ADA prevented discrimination on the basis of disability, but it was also motivated by a few other movements that happened. So the 1960s were a period of tremendous social progress and movements in the civil rights movement. One of the very interesting things about this movement is that it sparked a new generation of activists, especially those within the disability space who had been marginalized for centuries. So one of the first pieces of one of those first sparks to this movement was something known as the 504 protest, which was led by this amazing activist called Judy Heumann. If you haven't yet, there is a show called Crip Camp. And Crip Camp is a show on Netflix. It's an amazing documentary. If you have some time this weekend, I highly recommend you watch it. But Judy Heumann, who was an activist and she was a camp counselor, it was basically, let's talk about Crip Camp first. So Crip Camp was this camp run by hippies. And so what happened was that all people from all abilities, I mean, people with cerebral palsy, people who were blind, people who were deaf, people with mobility, people with cognitive disabilities, all came together to this camp run by hippies. And everyone, for the first time in their lives, had this experience where they would play baseball, go to the pool, date, and just have all of these experiences where they didn't feel other. Experiences like Crip Camp created this community of people with disabilities where they said, you know what, I deserve rights, I deserve access to society. Judy Heumann is an incredibly she is my idol. And she actually said a quote during this time that said, if I have to be thankful for the right to an accessible bathroom, that's not accessibility. Accessibility is not about just showing gratitude for the bare minimum. And so people like Judy Heumann created movements like the 504 protest. This was in 1977, decades before the 1990s and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the 504 is kind of like what sparked so many other movements, such as the Deaf President Now movement, which is there's a university out in Washington, D.C., Gallaudet University. It's like the Harvard of deaf culture. It is a mecca of deaf culture. During the 1988 protests, the Board of Trustees, the body of individuals that are responsible for selecting the new college president, they had three options for a new college president. Two of these individuals were individuals with hearing disabilities who knew American Sign Language, who knew about deaf culture. And then there was a woman who did not know American Sign Language, did not know anything about deaf culture, did not have any proximity to disability. The Board of Trustees said, oh, you know what? We know that there's two qualified candidates who can become president of the university, but no, we don't want them. We want the person who hears, we want the person who doesn't know American Sign Language, we want the person who doesn't have proximity to deaf culture. And the students, they were like, how dare you? And they banded together with professors, with alumni, with staff, demanding that the Board of Trustees institute the first university president at Gallaudet had a hearing disability, knew American Sign Language, and actually identified with the very community that he was tasked with representing. That changed everything for people with disabilities everywhere. For the first time, people with disabilities saw someone in a position of leadership, in a position of power, instituting change. And then there is something like the Capitol Crawl that happened in July of 1990. And it was this movement that protested the lack of accessibility in the architecture of our country's political system. So Congress in the 1990s was not accessible. If you were someone in a wheelchair or somebody that had, what do you call those? Crutches, there were no elevators for you to get into any, or ramps for you to get into any of the government buildings. So the Capitol Crawl was this protest where people with mobility disabilities crawled up the steps of the Capitol, reaching all the way to the top. So you can imagine all of these individuals with mobility disabilities just crawling up the steps to showcase how inaccessible the architecture in the United States is. And all of these movements led to the ADA, which is turning 31 years old this July. So the movement that we are seeing, the conversations we're having around disability are technically relatively new. The movement around inclusion is relatively new, and it's so amazing to be living history with you all today. So now let's talk about our conversation for today, which is really mask communication. Specifically, we're going to talk around this topic with the theme and the understanding that this is really going to be a conversation around disability. But I want you to take the things that we're going to talk about and think that these are tips, tools that you can use with individuals that may not necessarily have a disability. And so one of the things that I am always going to tell each one of you is to lead with empathy. So do things assuming the best intentions for people instead of thinking, oh, that girl, oh, she is so annoying. Every time I talk to her, she just is so stuck up. Instead of thinking that thing, this person may have a disability that I don't know about, that they haven't disclosed, and I am just going to assume best intention. I am going to assume that they didn't hear me. So let's talk about mass communication. So mask. So COVID has made mask a regular thing in our lives for the last year. And so when I put on my mask, or actually when I block my microphone, you will immediately hear that the quality of sound decreases. Masks also prevent me from being able to read lips. As a person with a hearing disability, I depend a lot on lip reading. That does not mean, please don't ever, when somebody tells you that they have a hearing disability, do not do this. Don't ever do that. It is so rude and disrespectful. Speak normally. If somebody asks you to speak louder, raise your voice a little bit louder. You don't have to scream at the person. It is incredibly rude as well. So one of the things I will talk about is, for me, as someone with a hearing disability, one of the things that I have done to facilitate my communication is my mask has two messages. The first message I have here is I am deaf. And then the other one says I have hearing loss. The reason I wear this mask is because I want to be able to communicate with other individuals who may be communicating with me that I have a hearing disability, because oftentimes people, again, do not lead with the best intentions. So someone will think that I am ignoring them, or that I am being rude, or whatever it is. So I will put on my mask, walk around, and then just really communicate with people around me that I have a hearing disability. Now, one of the things that I have found and discovered over the last few years is clear panel masks. Now, there are some masks, and I will be sending these over to Katarina after this presentation so that she can research them a bit more. This is one of my favorite masks. It has been FDA approved. So one of the things I love about this mask is that it provides clear paneling. So it provides clear paneling to allow me to have my lips read. There's a lot of conversation that is missed with masks, like smiling, frowning, sticking out your tongue. And so with the clear mask, I am able to talk to someone. They are able to lip read what I am saying. This specific mask does not fog up. So it still distorts sound, but it allows me to lip read and follow along to what is being said. I also love that it has a protective layer on the bottom, and at the top, and at the very top, it also has this kind of like metal so that it fits perfectly over my nose. So I highly recommend that every organization carry one of these. These are so useful. I bought 125 pack of these. I give this out when I go to the doctor's office, when I go to restaurants, when I have meetings at work, and I just share those out so that those that I am communicating with in my environment are accessible to me. I share the information for those masks. So if you are an organization that is interested in that, I highly recommend that. One of the things I also want to point out is that this specific mask allows for you to do the behind the ear, but it also has the option for you to do the full body. So, I mean, not the full body, the full head. So I am able to put this down over my nose and over my head. And that is another option for individuals who may not want the behind the ear. You also have to think about how, as a person with a hearing disability, every time I put anything behind my ear, it causes sound, which distorts sound and causes kind of unnecessary background noise. The next thing I want to talk about is, as agencies that are working with individuals that and you have to interact with individuals, one of the most important things you can do is actually make your signs visible. If you are telling people to go to our location, instead of, hey everyone, please go to the left, you have to be conscious that not everyone in your audience may be able to hear. There may be an older individual who may be struggling with hearing, or maybe they're not paying attention. You want to make signs clear. You can put tape on the floor with arrows. You can just really create visual things. As someone with a hearing disability, it means so much to me when someone will just put something on the wall that says turn left, turn right, whatever. When you create visual signs, that makes my life so much easier as someone with a hearing disability, and also minimizes the amount of interaction that I have to have with people which in a COVID world is ideal and preferred. So anything that you can create that would be visual would be a huge plus. The next thing that I always encourage everyone to have is pen and paper. Sometimes I will be struggling with my hearing disability. The person has a heavy accent. I cannot understand what they're saying. Being able to have pen and paper readily available allows me to communicate with people and write down what I need from them or what they need from me, allow me to answer their questions. You will not always be able to communicate with someone effectively using oral language. So being able to write things down quickly is so useful. But if you want to get really fancy with it, one of the things I always encourage individuals to have is a whiteboard. I have seen these in so many small businesses in my neighborhood of Washington Heights, and it makes me so happy when I see these because as a person with a hearing disability who depends on technology, my batteries die every once in a while, and I don't always have pen and paper. But when a business is able to have a whiteboard, we can just write really quickly, erase really quickly, and of course, save the environment because we're not using pen and paper that will just be thrown away into the garbage. So the whiteboard is such a useful tool to have. Then there are some applications that I love. I will talk about my favorite one, which is the Google Live Transcribe application. Now, the way that Google Live Transcribe application works, if you are someone with a hearing disability, you are wearing a mask, but let's say that you're having a hard time understanding and following along to what people are saying. There's an application on your phone called Google Live Transcribe. It's only available on Android phones and Pixel phones, not on the iPhone. And so how it works is I will be talking, and so the application will be hearing what I am saying and transcribing everything I am saying in real time. One of the really powerful things about this is that también puedo comenzar a hablar en español y va a transcribir lo que estoy diciendo en español. So, as you can see, it will transcribe what I am saying in English, Spanish, or any one of the Google languages. You can speak in French, Italian, Mandarin, and it will transcribe that for you. It's such a powerful tool. You can also use this technology, the Google Live Transcribe, put it on your desk. If you are greeting people, put it right on your desk and talk, and it will transcribe everything that is being said in real time. If you have an iPhone and you're not with the cool people that have Android phones, you can use an application called Otter. The Otter application is really a recording application. The thing is that it can be used by iPhone users and Android users. So when you go on the application, you will press the record button. And so what it does is that just like Google Live Transcribe, it will transcribe what is being said in real time. Unlike Google Live Transcribe, the font in Otter is very small and you cannot change it. Also with Otter, you get a limit of about 40 minutes per recording. So you can only use Otter for about 40 minutes. With Google Live Transcribe, you just need to be connected to the Wi-Fi and you can talk for as long as you want. And actually, let me just really showcase how this works. So with the Google Live Transcribe, you can make the font bigger. So you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. With Otter, you are not able to do that, but it is an application that is available on the iPhone. A third tool that I will talk about that is available on both the Android and the iPhone is called Ava. Ava is a tool that I like. I don't love it. I like it. I enjoy it. It is usable. And so I recommend Ava if you don't have an iPhone, if you don't have an Android phone, or if you need something that's just slightly bigger than Otter. You have to remember when you are working with individuals that are older or that may have visual disabilities, you want to make sure that you prioritize font size, which is something that you can use on the Ava application. Then there is ASL interpreting services. If you are interacting with someone that has a hearing disability and they are not oral, because remember, disability is a spectrum. Not everyone has hearing equipment. Not everyone has access to oral language. Some people use American Sign Language. As an organization, you should be aware of how to get access to ASL interpreting services if a client or a customer comes into your facility that needs access to American Sign Language. It is very important for you to acknowledge that not everyone knows how to read and write. Some individuals may prefer to have an ESL interpreter to facilitate communication, so reach out to your organization to know what resources are available. In New York City specifically, I believe the New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities has some resources that you can find to figure out how to make your events or your meetings accessible. And you can just technically just dial in a number using these services and get connected directly to an ASL interpreter to facilitate your communication with someone that uses ASL to communicate. And with that said, that is pretty much the presentation for today on best practices for communicating with someone with a hearing disability or without a hearing disability, or just really communicating in our current COVID world with someone that is wearing a mask. And with that said, I am going to turn it back to Rafaela and Katarina and open the floor up for any questions. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mariela. This was really incredible. I'd love to open the floor up to any questions that anyone might have. Feel free to unmute yourself, write in the chat, raise your hand.
Any questions, comments, concerns, words of wisdom?
This is Christina from FCBC. I don't have a question, but I do want to say it was one of the best presentations I've ever seen. I think that the history that you provided and the samples and alternatives and just the things that you gave us as resources, I'm really excited about it. I feel better, able to communicate better. I've realized some things that I've seen that have not been done correctly. So I just want to commend you and just say thank you. This was a very well thought out and well done presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. One more thing that I want to bring up to people's attention is really going back to the topic of never assume anything about anyone. So again, always try to lead with the best of intentions, never make any assumptions about anyone's ability. Ask questions, ask people if there's anything that you can do to help. And just really try to facilitate communication and conversations in a way that prioritizes how you would want to be treated in those types of situations. So with that said, Katarina, I don't really have anything else to add. If anybody wants to open up the floor for questions or comments, I'll be here for a minute.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to share some quick announcements with everybody. If you do have another question, feel free to share it after I finish up these quick announcements. We'll stick around for a couple minutes, but wanted to tell you all about some upcoming initiatives and trainings that our team Network Capacity has coming up. So first, I want to call out that we will have a feedback form coming out for this training. I really enjoyed it. I know I learned so much, and we would love to hear what you all thought of the training this afternoon and learn what other kinds of trainings you would like to see our team offer. I'm going to drop in the chat right now the link to the feedback form. And you can fill that out right now. I'll also send it in a follow-up email. Another thing that I would like to shout out is that our team has launched a one-to-one support initiative. And that initiative is so you can make appointments with either Katerina or myself to talk through any issues or challenges that you are facing at your agency. And we will make an appointment with you and talk through and work through any next steps we can do to help you solve that problem. Some examples could be help with fundraising, grant writing, volunteer management, a number of things. So if you are experiencing anything that you'd like to talk through or have a thought partner with, you can sign up for a one-to-one support session. So also going to drop the link for that sign up in the chat as well. And then lastly, I would like to let you all know about another very exciting training that we have coming up on June 24th. And the sign up for that is not quite live, but you will get it in an email. And it is in honor of Pride Month in June. And the title of that training is Enhancing Workplace and Service Experiences for LGBTQ plus individuals. And the goal of this training is really to improve staff and leadership's understanding of the needs of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer employees and community members, and will be placing an emphasis on supporting transgender individuals in your communities. And as an attendee, you'll be provided tools for improving communication, forms, facilities, and really creating inclusive food distributions and spaces. And you'll also learn a little bit about the requirements of the new gender law in New York State. So again, that will be on June 24th, so just about 30 days, a month out from right now. Awesome. So those are all of our announcements. Any other questions for Mariela? Okay, yes. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much for being here today. I feel like I will throw one question just to see if we can have some conversation with Mariela. Okay, so I want you to put yourself in the place of somebody going somewhere new. Like when you go somewhere new, what is your experience like as a person with a hearing disability or somewhere that you don't go often? I know that you've shared with me an experience you had at the DMV. I don't know if that would be a good story, but because I think it's really important for people to understand like what goes through somebody's head, especially for someone going to a food distribution for the first time. There might be specific, and if they have trouble hearing, there could be a lot of emotions or thoughts that we could become more aware of.
That's a great question. So I spoke with you a few months ago. I had to go to the DMV to renew my license, and it was chaos. So I just got a new hearing aid on my left ear, and so the amount of input that I was receiving at the DMV was like number R1770, and then it's just all these visuals, and it's just really chaotic. So for me, going into a new place is really honestly a lot of anxiety. I try to stay centered and stay calm whenever I go to a new space and try to talk with the staff. So I will try to find somebody and identify a staff member and say, I have a hearing disability, where do I go? I always make sure to carry pen and paper with me in case I am having trouble communicating, have my phone charged so I can turn on the Google Live transcribe. It is so meaningful to me when somebody just takes the time to talk with me as a person, because there are so many times that I can tell you that somebody has treated me as if I was less than, or if I was stupid, or just in a really disrespectful way that was unnecessary. So I have a bit of anxiety going into a new place. And so when I am able to talk with someone and they take the time to just write things down or repeat things, and just treat me like a regular person, it always makes my day. Now, one of the things that I'm saying is I'm not saying treat people with disabilities as if they are children. That is another extreme that we don't want to go into. You want to treat people as if they are people, as if they are adults with respect and dignity. You want to repeat things as necessary. So if you say things 2 times and a person is not able to understand or hear what you're saying, try rephrasing the question. Ask them, do you want me to write it down? But no, do you want me to write it down for you? Like, not like that. It's more, do you want me to write it down, or do you want us to go to a quieter area so that we can talk? Doing small things like that to really improve the customer experience have made a huge difference in my ability to feel welcome and at ease in new spaces. And again, it really goes back to when an organization or an individual takes steps to make sure that they prioritize accessibility. So I will give kudos here to Katarina, because last night she stayed with me at, like, I think it was 11 p.m. your time, just to make sure that we got the closed captioning to work for this event. And so that allows for me to have the feeling that Katarina cares about me being included in this digital space, because it's not always about being included in a physical space. It's also about being included in the digital space. So taking those extra steps to make sure that you prioritize my experience and someone with a hearing disability makes me so much more comfortable when I am able to go to a location and register a form, and it has that extra area of, do you need any accommodations? And I am able to say, I have a hearing disability, so that when I go to the location and they see my name and they immediately see I have a hearing disability, that already allows me to have the type of experience that I need to be included. So just really doing things to make sure that you, as a service provider, are able to cater to the different individuals with disabilities and proactively work with them, not reactionarily, but proactively work with people with disabilities to make sure you are prepared when they interact with you. Makes a huge difference in their lives and really will make the experience and your interaction with them that much easier.
Thank you for that. I really, really appreciate that. I think that adds a lot to today's conversation. And as a person who wears hearing aids myself, I always appreciate sharing experiences with you. I've got my hearing aids, you've got your cochlears. So we're all part of the club. But any other questions? I see, I'm looking at the chat, but I'm not seeing any new questions. And if there are no questions, we can close out, but I do want to make sure that we have the floor open for any other questions.
If I'll make one final announcement, one of the things that I will say is that I talk a lot about hearing disability, best practices, technology, policy that's coming up. Like, this is my stuff. This is the thing I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I have to talk about accessibility to somebody today. So if you like this presentation and you're interested in more content like this, I encourage you to follow me on social media. It's Project Hearing. I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I'm always posting like fun videos that just kind of like take this whole 1 hour conversation and sum it down into a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes. So I encourage all of you to follow me at projecthearing.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think that we can end today's presentation. I want to thank Mariela again for her time and all of you for showing up. You're showing up, you're making a commitment to learning, to hopefully incorporating some of these techniques and strategies that she shared with you. I also encourage you to use the one-on-one support meetings if you want to go further on this topic. Say, for example, you download Ava and you're having trouble using Ava, or you tried a few things but you haven't come up with a plan for how to incorporate the learnings from today's trainings into your food distributions, that's something that we could talk about as well and support you with. So I think there's a lot of support that we always want to provide you with, and you will get an email with the resources from today's training. So Rafaela, is there anything that I have missed?
Oh, you got it all.
All righty then. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and with Mariela for her time.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.